improvement. And then I'm really thrilled to be talking to Brent from Logistics, to very large organizations that have embraced these concepts and these ideas, and we've been lucky enough to go along with their journey. So, hey, Phillip, how you doing?
Doing very well. Yourself?
Good to see you again. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Anytime. Happy to be here.
Excellent. All right. Well, my name is Wally Leasure. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for the Americas, and joining me today is Phillip Maud. So, Phillip, maybe you could intro yourself for the team.
Phillip Maud. I'm Senior Operations Manager here at McElroy Manufacturing. I've been here at McElroy for, I'm in my 19th year, all of the time spent in a variety of different supply chain roles, whether it be planning, purchasing, warehouse, inventory management, etc.
As I like to say, the easy stuff, right?
Yes.
The stuff that, you just like folks on the phone, I'm sure you sleep very well at night, no problems, right?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Phillip. Appreciate that intro. And then for the folks out here, maybe you could talk a little bit about who is McElroy and the super cool stuff you do, and maybe, the industry, or maybe if we drive down the highway, something relatable about the equipment you guys put out.
Absolutely. We make industrial equipment that is used in infrastructure. Essentially, we sell we make a couple of different primary products. One is a finned tubing machine that is used in air-cooled heat exchangers. Which is, as you can imagine, being that business is going very well with the advent of data centers and whatnot. But our primary product line are our fusion equipment. So it's industrial equipment. It is used outside and in the ditch, or it's used in buildings. And what it is doing is joining thermofusible plastic pipe, and so it's used in these to join these pipes together. And these piping systems are closed loop and leak free, and they're used in a lot of different applications. Originally outside in the ditch for natural gas. Can't have natural gas leaking. And then it is really growing and blowing up from a water perspective, as water becomes a more and more resource, a more precious resource. And then you see it also in a lot of water return systems where you really can't have leakage either because of contamination, etc. So if you think about you see it used heavily out in fracking return systems. You're seeing it used in slurry and mining operations, but water and infrastructure is really where you're seeing it mostly deployed.
Amazing. Yeah. And if you don't mind, Phillip, just to add a little bit of the complexity that your equipment is dealing with, can you talk a little bit about that traceability aspect, where I think you've shared with me that, so if you don't mind expanding for the team here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So our machines are used, when you talk about those thermofusible plastic piping solutions, they're used to fuse pipe anywhere from 1/2 inch to 2 meters in diameter. So there's a wide variety of complexity in all of that. But one of the things that is also important is we've got technology that basically guides users through the operation of the machine, and also tracks a lot of the data associated with that fusion. Think about the time under where the machine is putting those pipes under pressure, who the operator is, exactly where that location is, and all of that is now traceable with our technology. And so then people can actually audit those fusion processes remotely to determine whether or not the fusion was performed to standard, and whether there might be a problem or an issue with that joint. Because ultimately, if you're following this process and you have these two clean joints, and you can kind of see the pressure being applied as the pipes are being brought in and it's being faced, and you can then that it was faced, and so you have two clean pipes, and how long it was heated, and how long the heater was not there, and how long it is held under pressure, and then whether or not you've got a solid fusion.
Yeah, amazing stuff. I always am so impressed with our customers and the things that, at some point in the world, someone was driving around and said, you know what, I'm going to invent a pipe fusion piece of equipment, right? And we're going to take over. So really, really cool. And then I know you guys are very proud of this as well. So, you mentioned the great growth that McElroy is going through, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that kind of growth journey and, where you guys are in Oklahoma.
Yep, absolutely. All of our manufacturing is done here in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have support offices and whatnot internationally, but it is all of our manufacturing and fabrication and assembly is happening here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And there's been quite a bit of growth over the past several years, and you kind of see it on the screen in front of you. In 2006, we added another 100,000 square feet, and that is essentially where we were doing all of our fabrication, so machining and welding and grinding. We've had to move some of that equipment back into our Fulton campus as we've continued to grow. In 2013, we added what is now our corporate headquarters, and where we assemble our large diameter machines. And then just in 2024, we added another facility out here in Broken Arrow, which is where I'm sitting now, to move the assembly of our medium diameter machines. And actually, if you come back and look at this in another year, there'll be another facility that's being added to house to expand our Admiral footprint and some of the fabrication capabilities there. We just continue to with a lot of there's a lot of growth.
Yeah, amazing. And then for the old folks on the phone, myself included, what did the Admiral campus used to be?
It used to be a Kmart, so we still see some of those blue light specials every once in a while.
I love that.
But as you can imagine, it's a lot of fun trying to coordinate material movement across all of those campuses, because a lot of those campuses support each other. So it definitely creates some challenges for us.
Yeah, and a lot of complexity that I'm sure some of the other folks on the phone can appreciate, because when you're, whether it's vertically integrated, or if you've got a facility around the corner, or if it's, in another town, trying to get sub-assemblies supplied to each other and all the fun with that. Really, really cool. All right, so the meat and potatoes here. So why don't you talk a little bit about just the challenges that exist when you're overseeing the supply chain at McElroy and part of that journey?
Yeah. So if we think about particularly some of this is still true, and some of it we've addressed with the IntuiFlow solution. But when you think about McElroy's environment, well, I think one of the most challenging pieces from a supply chain perspective is the variety that we find in our customer market in terms of expectations. The vast majority of our equipment is sold through a distribution network, but we have where they are stocking and servicing customers. We have new customers, though, as we've gone into the mechanical world, that have different lead time expectations. They expect us to,
Sure.
because we have different levels of competition there. And then we've got international markets, and that fin tube market, where we don't have distributors, and they have a completely different set of lead time expectations. So for parts that we're also supplying through our distributor network. So trying to manage the variety there is one of our key challenges. When you think about our market, a lot of it is make to order. We're not making a lot of our product until an order is placed. That has had to shift over the years as we've gone into this, as we've gone into some of the mechanical and inside equipment. But and so we've had to kind of so some of our products have lead times that are built in, when you think about 6 to 8 weeks, and then you've got others that we've got to try and have on the shelf. So that was one level of complexity. In 2021, if we think about where we were particularly at the time, that a lot of our signals were moving on a daily basis
All
from a
right.
purchasing perspective, which
Yeah.
created a lot of noise for our buyers, and created all kinds of challenges from that perspective as well. So
Yeah, that noise is brutal. And anyone on the call that has lived that life, right, where you come in on Monday, you try to get as far as you can by Friday, unfortunately, and then you think everything's in an okay position, and then you start again on Monday. That is really, really tough. So I appreciate you sharing that background. And then, you talked about this a little bit. Oh, let me see if I can tell us a little bit, kind of expand on some of those thoughts as well, a little more detail here. You talk about thousands of SKUs that you guys are managing or your team is managing, and then a little more on the lead times there.
yeah, when we think about our product mix, we like to say that we are a lower volume. None of our products have really what the users on the folks on this call would consider high volume, but there's a wide variety of parts. So we like to think of ourselves as low volume, high mix, which
All right.
results in a boatload of SKUs. When we look at our purchased part lead times, I'm sure a lot of folks can relate. We've got some things that are expected that our suppliers can have on the shelf tomorrow or to later today if we needed. We've got other
Yeah.
parts that are more than a year in lead time, and that doesn't necessarily correlate directly to our customers' expectations and what we've got to provide, right? And then we've got, when you think about machines that can fuse a pipe that is 2 meters in diameter, it has a fairly deep bill of materials. And we've got other parts and other products that are 1 level deep, right? So a variety of there's a good variety in our bill of materials. We talked about the multiple locations that we're trying to support. We haven't really talked about some of the planning. So when I was brought in, we have an advanced planning and scheduling tool that we're using, but ultimately we're having to, and that's feeding our ERP with some recommendations. But from a purchase part perspective, it moving those expectations on a daily basis in reaction to a lot of that demand. And when we talk about moving those expectations, a part we may have something on order and it may be needed September 1, and then tomorrow a buyer may see it and it's needed August 28th. So really small movements. And then the next day you might see it, oh, something has changed and now it's September 5th. And so there were a lot of really small movement creating a whole lot of noise for our buyers as they were trying to match their supply to specifically to orders that were being placed.
Yeah, amazing. And I think the lead times, I think you and I were kind of laughing about this just in the world, right? It's hard not to bring your personal experience with Amazon into the workplace, because I think and I think customers have all done that, or industrial customers have done that. So, if I give the example and everyone laughs, right? But if I'm willing to pay enough, I could have a dirt bike in my driveway in an hour from Amazon, right? It's just incredible. Yep. So really, very, very, yeah, go ahead.
And I was going to say, and then it was even worse at the time, because this was when we were looking at this, it was 2020, 2021, and those lead times were not stable.
Yes, exactly. Excellent. Let me go ahead and get over here. Okay, so the world is painful, right? And you're chugging along, and then you begin kind of this quest or this search to see what's in the marketplace. Talk a little bit about kind of the priorities for you as you were exploring solutions and as you realized, hey, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, ultimately, we had a belief that if we could stabilize our purchase parts supply, meaning that I have that on the shelf, I have what I need on the shelf, that we could support our customers' lead times. Okay, so that was ultimately what we were trying to accomplish but we didn't have a good way of driving the right recommendations or working the right recommendations to get that material on the shelf. just to support that lead time responsiveness, if you will. Additionally, as you can imagine, we needed to calm down a lot of the noise associated with the movement that I was describing earlier from a purchase perspective. And we needed to be able to identify what those true priorities were. And in doing so, be able to provide some level of confidence or faith in the inventory that was being put on the shelf. There was a lot of distrust or a lack of understanding into what were driving some of the decisions that we were making, if that makes sense, and how that manifested itself in inventory on the shelf. So ultimately, we were trying to come and because everybody was operating with a slightly different version of what they believed the truth to be, because they were trying to anticipate what was that going to be that next move, right? So we didn't have a single source of truth. We didn't have a tool that was intuitive for the buyers to use. They were all using individual things that had been cobbled together over X number of years of experience in working in the industry. And we didn't have, and so we really wanted a way to optimize inventory in such a way that we had faith in that inventory, and we were able to provide like it says here, a single source of truth and a single process and way for buyers to operate, so that we could be more responsive and actually drive process improvement. If everybody's doing it differently, it's really hard to optimize,
Yeah, I love it. And I will still say that, our largest competitor by far is Excel, and every other buyers and planners Excel spreadsheet that is our competitor, that is the market leader in supply chain solutions, is Excel. So
absolutely.
Very, very cool. And then, as over the years that we had known each other, you talked a little bit about kind of the stages that you had gone through looking backwards, so why don't you share a little bit about kind of the journey, when you started the journey, and how this all kicked off?
Yep. So I had spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to make our systems work to try and stage purchased inventory, like I said, so that we could support ultimately our customers' lead times. And everything I came up with was a cobbling together of, like you said, Excel. We were using database. We were feeding things back into our ERP. We were still seeing all of this noise, and nothing was optimal. I got an email. Email marketing worked. It sometimes works. In this case, it did. And it sparked interest, because it really sounded like they were trying that this tool actually did a lot of the things that I was cobbling together in ways, and was way more intuitive and way more responsive. So reached out to IntuiFlow at the time and started to dive into how we could make this work. We met with them. They provided us some simulations that helped us gain better understanding of the tool, because it's way easier to relate to when it's your data.
Sure.
And we were able to compare that to kind of some of the things that we were seeing. And really the ability to decouple that supply and demand was key, because it's that coupling of that supply and demand that was driving all of that noise, right? So if I could take away and decouple this specific demand driving this specific date for a specific purchase order, and start driving towards a level instead of that date, it was going to remove some of that noise. And then, as we continue to look at IntuiFlow, we're really intrigued by how, and I'm trying to come up with the right words, but how not easy, but the low bar, it seemed, in order for us to be able to integrate and realize some of those benefits. It wasn't insurmountable. It wasn't a massive 6-month ERP implementation. It was really, really encouraging, and that's what we found. So
yeah, Yeah, excellent, excellent. And then I want to talk a little bit now about kind of the wins that you've had, and I also want to talk a little bit about the approach you took. You did say something that Brent will also probably mention on our next session about the simulations, and that's something that I would offer for those of you that are new on the phone that have not had any experience with Algo or IntuiFlow. We do offer simulations where we can take some of your data and we would run it through and we would be able to show you, hey, if you would have bought into some of this planning logic, or if you want to see, hey, is DDMRP buffering appropriate for our product portfolio? Where does it make sense? Where does it not make sense? We don't claim to be a silver bullet, but it's really nice as you're exploring different ways and different mindsets to see, would this be a fit for us? And that's something that McElroy had gone through as part of their evaluation, very similar to Flowgistics, which we'll hear about shortly. So very exciting to have that capability and offer that to our prospects and our customers. All right, so then with all of that said, you go down this journey and then we get IntuiFlow up and going. You're starting to see some results. Why don't we talk a little bit about kind of the top 3 big hitters that you started to see very quickly and what you enjoy about this?
Yeah, one of the biggest wins is really the visibility that it provides in some of the decision making. As you can see up here, it provides a history that we can go back and evaluate to better understand the decisions that were made. So if we have a challenge with inventory, if then we can go back here and look at what drove that decision and actually address that problem, as opposed to I don't want to say imagining what the problem was, but imagining what the problem was and trying to drive the solution that way. It allowed us to make much, we like to say that data is the emotional equalizer. And this provides that emotional equalizer. Everybody has emotion tied up to inventory levels, right? And this allowed us to go have data-based discussions about what is driving the inventory level, and therefore what we need to do to address the issue.
Yeah, I love that. And a couple call outs here for those that may or may not be familiar, right? So you can see this buffer flexing in this part analytics view out of courtesy of IntuiFlow. And there's a couple really cool things here that as you start to get into the tool and the solution and the concepts, that just like Phillip identified, if you wanted to look backwards and see, hey, what is going on here? Did we have an order recommendation that didn't get accepted? Did all of a sudden we have a pallet go missing and all of a sudden we were stocked out for some reason? You can identify actually kind of the day where that stuff occurs once you start to get familiar with these views.
Exactly, and it's amazing that you can see that the change in demand that drove that drove the decision, or the change in the buffer, and ultimately the change in the buffer that's driving the decision, and it provides a lot more confidence in the process that the buyers are following, which has been instant and allows you then to go focus on the real problems instead of the imagined ones.
The real problems. I mean, you work in supply chain, man. What are the real problems? And I think this is something that is super cool when you and I were talking a ways back. I think with the incredible growth that McElroy is going through, I think this will resonate very well with people on the phone. So talk a little bit about the inventory growth relating to the business.
Yeah, so if we have been under we are in an incredible growth cycle right now. I think we have grown 2 to 3 times. Our revenue is grown 2 to 3 times what it was in 2021, for example, and it is just exploding this year. And you can't sit there and say that inventory hasn't increased as a result. When you have increased revenue, you're going to have increased inventory, right? But what the tool has allowed us to do is have a lot more control over and understanding of that growth, if that makes sense. We have not seen it multiply to the same degree that our revenue has, right? So you've got a lot more controlled inventory growth. Before IntuiFlow, when we would go through a growth cycle, it was a lot of different decisions being made by a lot of different people that resulted in inventory growing faster than ultimately demand, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
It
And
does.
what what the IntuiFlow has provided us is a process that we're able to, and a tool that we're able to, you know, have better control over the inputs, that the more consistent inputs to the buyers as they're making their decisions to address the growth, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, I want to skip forward just a slide or two. I know
Yep.
you mentioned having a single source of truth, which is fantastic. I think this is something that's really important because you've been on this journey. Talk a little bit about if, we were having a cup of coffee and I was about to head down this journey. What would you suggest, or what would you, call out for folks that are considering something like this? Any tips?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you got to have alignment. You need support at all levels. It can't be driven, and we were really fortunate to have that. But and that can be a challenge getting everybody on that same page. But you have to have support at all levels from the top down. Probably our biggest win was how we rolled out the product. We rolled it. We did when we were able to implement it. We didn't flip the switch and then all buyers were operating using the tool. We flipped the switch for one buyer, worked specifically with them, learned from them. We're able to implement those learnings, gain user acceptance, gain
Yeah.
a champion, if you will, before moving on to the next person, where we had fewer learnings, right? And we had additional people to help us with the education, and we kind of rolled it out that way, and that was a massive win for us. Um, you know, I don't know how many folks can relate, but the amount of things that and opportunities that we see are way larger than the ones than what we can actually get our arms wrapped around and make progress on. So making sure that you're focused and on what you can actually accomplish, and not reaching too far is another one.
Yeah.
Subject matter experts are key. We've got one that is our IntuiFlow expert, and that really drives a lot of the consistency in education and further development and adoption of the tool. And having that champion and they're contagious. You end up growing
Yeah.
more, but you've got to have a subject matter expert. And then the biggest thing is, you're not going to flip this switch and then tomorrow everything's perfect. You're gonna flip the switch and you're gonna learn, and you've got to continue to configure, continue to learn from what you're seeing and how, and the methodology. And as you're learning, as your understanding grows, the ways in which you can use the tools and the information grows as well. So that's what's exciting about it. I mean, that's what makes it fun to come into work. So
Yeah, I love that. And I know unfortunately it's not always possible to take the approach that you took with your team members and your staff, but I love that approach about really kind of getting in, because you're changing the way that people operate daily. And I think the world of supply chain can be very chaotic, and people have gone into firefight and survival mode. So by identifying opportunities and then being able to work with team members where you can, right, to ensure that they are bought into this and that this will make their life easier. And this is where we really want you to focus your time, not running down hardware for expedites. I think stuff
yeah,
like that has become very relatable. Great.
it
And
also
then,
helps you better understand where your obstacles are too, because there are
yeah,
folks
true, true.
that are tied to the way that they have always done it, and understanding where those challenges lie helps as well. But as you grow that base around them, yeah, it helps conform as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. And then I know, Philip, I'm coming to Oklahoma here before the end of the year, and we're going to do a walk, and maybe I'll try some barbecue. I don't know. We'll see. But why don't you tell us a little bit about, some of the other quick wins that you saw, or just wins in general, and then maybe a little bit about the next steps that McElroy is currently evaluating.
Yep. So how quick we were able to get up to speed was faster than a lot of executives wanted to believe based upon their experience. It was that was really phenomenal. That I know we skipped over, but that single source of truth has been massive. One place where the buyers can go to see all of the information that they need. They're not having to use all those other tools, which means we're only having to maintain one set of tools. They're only using one set of tools, and they're all applying the same set of, because they're using the same set of tools. They're applying similar, if not the same logic to working those things, right? I cannot emphasize enough how awesome the team at Algo has been that IntuiFlow team has been to work with, to further our understanding of the tool and unlock some of the other capabilities. That's been fantastic. So those are kind of some of the big wins. But we took the approach that because of the tools that we have in place, etc., really we wanted to focus on just purchase parts. We have exhausted, we have done a phenomenal job of reducing the variability, the impact of the variability that we see in our purchase parts supply, right?
Awesome.
That has been, that's been massive. It is night and day over what we experienced prior to that. But we operated under the assumption that if we had purchase parts, that we could operate within our customers' lead times expectations, right? And what we're finding is that there's enough variability there that we really probably need to do something. We need to figure out a way to decouple that supply and demand on some of the manufactured parts as well. So we're starting to have conversations about how to integrate some of this methodology into our manufactured parts, and then we're starting to look at autopilot. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a little bit late to that table, but we're really excited about some of the benefits there. And then some of the stuff that Eric was talking about earlier, the opportunity to do some scenario modeling and better understand what are the limitations of your system as it's operating today, I think would drive a lot of comfort to the executive team from the perspective of that's what they're worried about, right? They're worried about if we double in demand, what do we need to do to be able to accommodate that? Where are our risk points? What level of growth can we absorb? And a lot of that, and having some of that visibility, I think is the other piece that's really interesting and exciting. It all comes back to I want to do it all, but it all comes back to what can you reasonably accomplish in a short amount of time.
Very, very cool. Well, Phillip, I really appreciate everything. We actually did get a question real quick before we shift gears. So you got a question. What ERP, if you don't mind sharing, what ERP system are you using? And then are you using an interface between your ERP and IntuiFlow? I'll let you take that.
Yeah, we're using Infor XA, and all of that directly feeds back and forth between IntuiFlow. So in the Infor XA is our source of truth. It is where all of our POs are managed, but it is being all generated out of IntuiFlow.
Awesome. Really appreciate that. Well, if there aren't any other questions.
Sorry, Wally, let me just jump in. Just one more question there. When did you start implementing IntuiFlow? How long do you use it in your daily business?
We implemented IntuiFlow in 2021 and have been using it daily since. So.
Great. And then the last one we had was, what's the process that McElroy goes through when deciding to start stocking rather than making to order?
Yeah, it's really a function of our customers. So and the market expectations associated with that product line. So it's as well as the volume. So if it's kind of a combination of those three things. It's primarily customer driven.
Okay, and then the final one that just popped in, Philip, do you use our CCP module, or is it more critical to deal with supply planning and long lead time in your activity?
For us, we were focused on those purchase parts and using the demand planning. But ultimately, we're starting to need to again start looking at those manufactured components and how we better plan those. So it was if I can eliminate the one source of variability for managing those manufactured parts being the purchase parts availability, then I see how much noise there. I get a better visibility into what sort of noise there is in those manufactured parts.
Great. And sorry, Wally, just the last one here. Philip, are you just using the material planning portion or the scheduling and execution as well?
Just the material planning at this stage of the game, but the scheduling and execution is a piece that we're discussing as a potential next step.
Great. That's all the questions we had for Philip at this point. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. I really appreciate the time. I'm very excited to see the continued success of McElroy and look forward to talking to you more in the future.